There is something profoundly tragic about watching the wicked prosper. You've seen it, haven't you? The liars, the manipulators, the deceivers, those who hurt others with impunity, climb ladders they didn't build, sit at tables they didn't set, and bask in blessings they never earned. You stood in silence as they mocked your pain, pretending their lives were touched by divine favor, when all along they were stealing peace from the hearts of others. And for a time it looked like they had won. But what if I told you that not every blessing is a reward? What if what they're calling a gift is actually a ticking clock of divine reckoning? What if the very things they hold so tightly, the wealth, the success, the admiration of fools, are not signs of favor, but signs of a trap slowly tightening around them? You see, God does not always strike with thunder. Sometimes he lets people walk deeper into their illusion of triumph, only so their fall can be louder, sharper, and more complete. Sometimes the judgment is not immediate pain, but extended comfort that calcifies the soul and numbs the conscience. And then, when the time is ripe, the same things they celebrated become the very chains that bind them. Their blessings turn to burdens, their stage becomes their cage, and what they once used to mock you becomes the curse that keeps them awake at night. Have you ever wondered why they seem restless despite all they have? Why, even with laughter on their lips, their eyes still betray emptiness? That is no accident. That is not peace. That is the slow unraveling of counterfeit success. That is what it looks like when heaven removes its hand and leaves them to the consequences of their own doing. And you, yes, you who suffered in silence, you were not forgotten. You were being watched, refined, strengthened. Your tears weren't wasted. They were recorded. Every night you cried because someone took what was yours. Every time you chose kindness while they chose cruelty, God saw it. And he did not forget. But this isn't just about your pain. It's about justice, and not the kind you seek with vengeance, but the kind that is sacred, complete, and irreversible. Divine justice does not scream. It whispers through the cracks of human plans. It rearranges circumstances without warning. It turns palaces into prisons and applause into torment. What they thought would elevate them is now haunting them. What they stole with laughter is now weighing them down in silence. Because God does not let evil flourish forever. He allows time, yes, but only to let the proud write their own undoing in bold letters. And now, you're beginning to see it, aren't you? The cracks, the weight, the guilt they can't confess. The blessings they flaunted now burden their hearts like anchors in deep waters. You feel it in your spirit, you know something has shifted. It's not just chance. It's not karma. It is divine order restoring itself. And as you stand in the ruins they left behind, something in your soul begins to rise. A knowing, a strength. Not from revenge, but from the clarity that God will not let wickedness rest in comfort. He will turn their blessings into burdens they cannot escape. The comfort they stole will become their cage. They didn't just take your time. They didn't just steal opportunities. They stole your peace. They reached into the safest corners of your heart, the places you never thought someone you trusted would ever violate, and they took comfort for themselves, leaving behind chaos for you. And the cruelest part, they smiled while doing it. They used your kindness as a stepping stone. They used your loyalty as leverage. They took what made you whole and turned it into something that made them powerful. But here's the truth most people won't say aloud. Not all comfort is earned. Some people build their comfort on the back of someone else's heartbreak. They prop up their happiness by draining yours. And the world, for a while, may clap for them, may even reward them. It might look like they're thriving. But look closer. Listen deeper. You'll begin to hear the quiet sounds of something unraveling. Because stolen comfort doesn't come without consequences. It doesn't bring peace. It brings pressure. It doesn't soothe. It suffocates. You may not have seen it yet, but you will. The same comfort they snatched from you is already becoming the bars of their own cage. They thought they were clever. That by manipulating your trust, They had found a shortcut to success. That by taking advantage of your silence, your patience, your forgiveness, they could build a life without consequence. But what they didn't understand is that God doesn't build foundations on theft. Whatever is built through betrayal is doomed to rot from the inside. They thought they were building a home of comfort. In truth, they were building a prison brick by brick, with every lie they told, every moment of false laughter, every act of cruelty masked as confidence. And now, the walls are closing in, because there is no rest for the one who has sinned without remorse. No comfort for the one who pretended to be kind while holding a dagger behind their back. The things they thought would make them feel secure are starting to weigh on them like chains. The lifestyle they bragged about feels empty. The relationships they built on convenience are crumbling, and deep down, they feel it, a pressure they can't name, a sorrow they can't explain. You may think they've forgotten you, that they've moved on without guilt, but guilt is a quiet predator. It doesn't scream. It lingers. It watches. And then it seeps into every part of a person's life, into their sleep, into their relationships, into their smile. You'll notice it eventually, the way their joy looks forced, the way their words sound rehearsed, the way their life so full of blessings feels strangely hollow. Because blessings gained by breaking someone else don't stay blessings. They transform, slowly, painfully. The comfort they stole becomes unbearable. The things they took with greed now demand their soul in return. And no matter how much they try to hide it behind pretty pictures, curated success, and fake laughter, they are not free. They are trapped. And isn't that justice? Not the kind that comes from revenge, but the divine kind. The kind that allows people to step into their own destruction, thinking it's deliverance. The kind that lets the very thing they stole become the weight that breaks them. So if you're still sitting in the pain they left behind, hear this. What they took didn't become a blessing for them. It became a burden. A burden that grows heavier by the day, one they cannot run from, one they cannot undo. They built their comfort by tearing you down, and now, that comfort has become a cage they can't escape. Their fame will turn into isolation. They wanted to be admired, praised, worshipped. They chased recognition not because they earned it, but because they craved validation to cover the rottenness within. And when they hurt you, they didn't just betray your heart, they used your silence as a ladder to climb higher. While you were quietly rebuilding your broken pieces, they were performing for the world, pretending, smiling, telling half-truths and polished lies. They played the role of the good one, the successful one, while you sat alone, carrying the weight of their cruelty. And for a time it worked. People clapped for them. Their names were spoken with admiration. They stood in rooms they didn't deserve, receiving praise they never earned. And you had given your loyalty, your energy, your love were erased from the story like a forgotten chapter. But don't be deceived by the noise. Fame built on lies is a house with no walls. It looks glorious from a distance, but inside it is hollow and cold, because there is a price to pretending. There is a price to wearing a mask for too long. And that price is isolation, soul-deep isolation. They're surrounded by people now, yes, but look closer. Not one of them truly knows who they are. Not one of them would stay if the truth surfaced. They built a world where no one sees their real face, and now they can't take the mask off, even when they want to. That's not popularity. That's imprisonment. And the irony. The same crowds they once ran to are the very ones they now hide from. Because deep down they know. They know their fame wasn't built on truth. They know their success carries shadows, and it haunts them. The applause is loud, but it no longer soothes. The spotlight is bright, but it exposes every crack. And slowly the echo of their own voice is the only sound they trust, because even they don't know who's really for them anymore. You might wonder how someone with so many followers can feel so alone. But you know the answer, don't you? Because while they were chasing fame, you were chasing healing. While they performed, you processed. While they ran toward the crowd, you sat with your pain and faced it. That makes you stronger than they ever were. They climbed fast, but without roots. And now, every eye they tried to impress becomes a mirror, reflecting back the truth they've tried to bury. And here's the part that stings the most for them: they can't go back. They can't undo the narrative they've created. They can't tell the truth now, even if they wanted to, because admitting what they did to you would mean losing everything they gained. And so they keep pretending. But the cost of the performance is their peace. That's how God works sometimes. He lets the liars rise, but not to bless them. He allows them the stage so their fall can be seen by all. He lets their fame reach its peak, not as a gift, but as a setup for exposure. And when it comes, it's not loud. It's quiet, isolating, suffocating. The very people they impress become the ones who question them. The love they fake turns into distance. The spotlight becomes a cold, glaring light that shows every flaw. And you no longer need to speak. Their life is becoming the apology they never gave. Their loneliness is the answer to the silence they left you in. And their fame, once so intoxicating, has become the wall that separates them from peace. Because fame without truth is the cruelest kind of loneliness. And now they are learning that the hard way. Their wealth will haunt them with fear of loss. They wanted more. Always more. More than they earned, more than they needed, and more than they deserved. But what pierced the heart wasn't their wealth, it was how they got it. You watch them take shortcuts, manipulate situations, deceive the innocent, and rob peace from people like you, just to pad their pockets and puff up their pride. And while you struggled to recover from the damage they caused, they walked with arrogance, acting as though they were untouchable, blessed even. But you knew the truth. You saw how their gain came from someone else's grief, maybe yours, and that grief they never acknowledged it. They just counted their profits while you counted your losses. They stood tall in stolen garments while you buried your self-worth beneath the weight of betrayal. It may look like they've won. It may seem like life has handed them everything they wanted. The cars, the houses, the lifestyle. But what kind of victory requires you to betray your soul? Because here's the divine twist in all of this: when wealth is built on wrong, it never brings rest. It brings fear, a gripping, unshakable fear that it all could vanish. That one secret, one slip, one scandal will unravel it all. That the hands which once grabbed so greedily must now cling desperately just to hold it together. They may smile, but their hearts are trembling. They may post pictures of success, but inside they are prisoners to the fear of loss. Every dollar they counted is now counting down against them. Every lie that led to profit has turned into a chain around their neck, because wealth, when stolen or manipulated into existence, never settles. It whispers. It haunts. It demands repayment. And how do you repay what you stole from another person's peace? You, who sat in silence watching them rise, know what it's like to live without. You've been humbled, tested, refined. But they were never prepared to lose because they never believed they could. And that's where the fear is born. It isn't the money they're afraid of losing, it's the image, the power, the illusion of being untouchable. Because without it, who are they? Do you see it now? The signs, the guarded behavior, the constant checking, the nervous energy, the people they trust less and less, because even they know what was gained in deception can be lost in truth. And the truth always comes, not because you force it, but because God is just. This is how divine balance works. They may keep the money, but lose the peace. They may sleep in grand homes, but lie awake at night, staring at ceilings that can't silence the guilt in their chest. Because every luxury gained at the cost of someone else's well-being carries a spiritual debt, and no amount of spending can cancel that out. And that fear, oh, that fear, it grows. It eats at them, slowly, quietly. They look over their shoulders. They question motives. They distrust everyone. Not because the world changed, but because they did. Because deep down they know. They know the truth of what they did to get here, and they know it was never theirs to keep. So while they may flaunt their wealth, remember this: it no longer comforts them. It torments them. Every possession reminds them of who they became to get it. Every gain echoes with the silence of the ones they hurt. And every passing day reminds them that nothing truly stolen ever stays. That's the curse they carry now, not poverty, but the fear of losing everything they pretended to deserve. Their circle will collapse from within. They looked powerful, didn't they? Surrounded by people, supported by voices, wrapped in the warmth of admiration. To the world it appeared as though they were deeply loved, endlessly respected. But if only the world could see the foundation. If only people could see what you saw, the cracks behind the charm, the manipulation beneath the smiles, the games behind the gestures. You remember when they discarded you, not quietly, not with grace, but with arrogance, as if your presence was disposable, as if your loyalty meant nothing. They replaced you with ease, filling the space you held with people who didn't know the truth. And in your pain, you watched from a distance as they built a circle not of love, but of convenience, not of honesty, but of performance. They chose people who applauded their lies, not those who challenged their wrongs. But here's the truth: a circle built on lies cannot stand forever. The performance eventually unravels. The masks eventually slip. The truth, no matter how deeply buried, always has a way of surfacing, especially when the foundation is rot. They thought they were winning by surrounding themselves with those who didn't know their truth. But what they didn't realize is this: those kinds of people never stay loyal. Because relationships built on manipulation invite manipulation in return. The very energy they put out, the deceit, the pride, the arrogance, is now echoing back to them through the people they trusted. Their circle is no longer a shelter. It's a storm. Whispers are growing louder. Secrets are starting to leak. Those they once leaned on are stepping back, slowly, quietly, almost unnoticeably. Loyalty is turning into distance. Conversations that once felt safe now feel suspicious. And in that space where they once felt untouchable, they now feel completely exposed. Because here's the divine twist: they taught those people how to betray. By betraying you, by justifying it, by pretending there were no consequences, they opened the door for betrayal to live in their own house. And now it is their turn to feel the sting of abandonment, the uncertainty, the silence, the side glances, the fake smiles. The very poison they fed others has seeped into their own relationships. You might ask yourself, do they miss you? Maybe not at first. Maybe their pride wouldn't let them. But now, when everything is shaking, when the circle starts to shrink, when the calls grow fewer and the eyes around them no longer carry warmth, they remember you. Not because they finally value you, but because they finally realize what they traded for applause. And isn't that justice? Not the loud kind that makes headlines, but the quiet unraveling of a life built on betrayal. One friend at a time. One rumor at a time. One disappointed follower at a time. Until what once looked like a kingdom feels more like a tomb. You see, God doesn't just deal with individuals. He shakes entire systems. And when someone builds their world by tearing someone else down, He allows that very world to fold in on itself, not to punish blindly, but to restore the balance that was broken. Now they sit in rooms filled with people and feel alone. They laugh, but it doesn't feel the same. They question everyone, because they know the same game they played is now being played on them. And that is their torment. Their circle, once their source of power, has become their greatest uncertainty. This is how karma whispers, not with a scream, but with the slow, eerie silence of loyalty fading, one heartbeat at a time. Their peace will shatter under the weight of guilt. There's a silence that screams louder than any words. It creeps in during the quiet moments, when the noise fades, when the laughter dies down, when the applause ends. It's in those moments when no one's watching that guilt begins to speak. And for them, the ones who hurt you, used you, betrayed you, it's no longer a whisper. It's a roar. They thought they were walking away free. They believed that by silencing you, they silenced the consequences. But guilt is not bound by time or memory. It doesn't forget. It doesn't forgive. It doesn't care how well someone hides. It finds the cracks. It waits patiently in the dark corners of success, crawling through the walls of comfort, until suddenly it becomes unbearable. They may appear calm on the outside. They may carry on with their routine, post their happy pictures, wear their designer smiles. But guilt doesn't play by the rules of appearance. It creeps into the dreams. It alters the heartbeat. It sits heavy on the chest in the middle of the night. They start waking up anxious for no reason. The meals they once enjoyed now taste bitter. The places they used to find peace now feel suffocating. Why? Because the mind knows what the soul can't hide. You see, peace is a privilege, a gift that comes with living truthfully, humbly, and with integrity. It's the reward of clean hands and a pure heart. But when someone violates that, when they hurt others to help themselves, they forfeit peace, whether they realize it or not, and no amount of success can buy it back. They thought they had the strength to carry the guilt, but guilt grows. It starts as a small discomfort, a thought they try to ignore, but as time passes it multiplies. Every time they hear your name, every time someone reminds them of what they did, every time they see someone who reminds them of you, the weight increases. And unlike pain, guilt doesn't dull with time. It sharpens. They might pretend they've moved on, but there's no such thing as moving on when your spirit is still tethered to the damage you caused. They know what they did, even if no one else knows they do. And worse, God knows. And that truth becomes a burden heavier than any public consequence. They'll try to escape it. They'll stay busy, distract themselves with noise, but eventually they'll run out of places to hide, because guilt is not an external punishment, it's internal decay. It starts with restlessness and grows into regret. Regret that robs sleep. Regret that clouds joy. Regret that hollows out every smile and makes every win feel worthless. And here's where divine justice shows its brilliance, not always in destruction, but in internal unraveling. You prayed for peace while they caused you pain. Now God gives you peace, and to them He gives the mirror. And in that mirror they see everything they tried to run from. The words they said, the lies they told, the loyalty they betrayed, the love they crushed. It's not revenge. It's restoration. While you rise in healing, they crumble under guilt. The roles are reversing. The one they thought was weak is now strong. And the one who pretended to be strong is now haunted by what they hoped would stay buried. Because guilt is not just a feeling, it's a sentence. A life lived under the weight of knowing what you did and realizing you can't undo it. And no matter how far they run, how high they climb, their guilt goes with them. So if you've ever wondered whether they feel anything, they do. If you've questioned whether they're suffering, they are. Not with screams, but with silence. Not with chains, but with guilt. And that guilt, it's shattering every piece of peace they once thought they had. Their success will demand a price they can't pay. They climbed quickly, didn't they? As if the world owed them something. As if they had every right to step on others to reach the top. And when they reached the peak, they looked down not in gratitude, not in humility, but in pride. A pride so blind it couldn't see the trail of broken hearts, shattered trust, and silent victims they left behind. Maybe you were one of them. Maybe your hands helped build the very steps they used to rise. And maybe, just maybe, you were discarded the moment they no longer needed you. They called it ambition. They called it drive. But it was exploitation wrapped in charm, selfishness masked as leadership. They weren't driven by purpose, they were fueled by ego. And yet for a time it seemed like life applauded them. Promotions, praise, opportunities, they kept getting more. It felt like their actions had no consequences and your pain had no witness. But what they didn't know, what they refused to believe, is that every shortcut has a hidden toll, and every unjust gain demands a hidden price. That price is now knocking on their door. Because true success doesn't just require effort, it requires integrity. And success gained without character is like drinking salt water to quench thirst. It looks like fulfillment, but it leaves the soul more empty, more restless. They thought they were winning, but they were only borrowing time, borrowing peace, borrowing stability, and now the debt is due. You see, when people rise too fast, especially on the backs of others, they don't have the inner strength to sustain what they've built. The higher they go, the more their flaws are exposed, the more eyes are watching, the more pressure mounts, and suddenly the applause becomes expectation. The spotlight becomes surveillance. The pedestal becomes a prison. And the person who once seemed unstoppable begins to crack not because others attacked them, but because they never built anything real inside themselves. Now every decision feels heavier. Every move feels scrutinized. They don't trust anyone because deep down they know how easily they betrayed, and they assume others are the same. They can't rest because they fear the fall. They fear being found out. They fear being alone with their conscience because the silence screams louder than applause ever did. Their success, it demands maintenance, constant performance, constant pretending, and the cost. It's draining their spirit. The lifestyle they fought so hard to flaunt is suffocating them. The power they clung to now isolates them. And the influence they bragged about? It comes with 1,000 unseen obligations, all wrapped in anxiety, all wrapped in fear. And you who once questioned your worth because of how they treated you, you are now the one rising in peace, quietly, steadily, with no shortcuts, no manipulation, just grace and grit. While their tower starts to sway, your roots are growing deeper. While their world is full of noise and pressure, yours is beginning to overflow with something they can no longer touch, authentic peace. But this isn't just about comparison. This is about justice, the kind that doesn't scream revenge, but restores what was stolen, piece by piece. The kind that makes those who exploited others realize that their success didn't come free. It came at a cost they now can't afford. And here's where it hurts them most. They know they can't undo it. They can't go back to the start. They can't rebuild without first tearing everything down. But they're too afraid to do that, because everything they built is tied to a version of themselves they don't even like but can't let go of. So they continue trapped by their own image, suffocating in a role they created. Can you imagine the weight of that? To carry success that was never truly yours. To smile while your soul aches. To achieve everything you thought would bring joy only to realize it came with a spiritual price tag you can't afford to pay. Their mind is tired. Their heart is heavy. Their spirit is exhausted. And still the world claps, expecting more, demanding more. But there's nothing left inside. Only regret. Only fear. Only the haunting realization that in their rush to win, they lost everything that ever really mattered. And now they must live with the truth their success demanded a price, and they are paying with their peace. Their conscience will be their constant punishment. They acted like it never happened. Like the betrayal didn't matter. Like the wounds they inflicted were just unfortunate casualties on the road to their own success. You watched them carry on with life as though your pain was irrelevant. As though your trust, your tears, your loyalty were meaningless. You waited for an apology that never came. You waited for even a moment of acknowledgement, but instead they smiled and moved on. Or at least that's what it looked like on the surface. But beneath that surface lies a truth far more haunting than any public shame. Their conscience hasn't let them go, and it won't. Because while others may forget what they did to you, they never will. The mind records what the mouth refuses to confess. The heart holds on to what the ego tries to bury, and the soul. The soul remembers everything. They may appear untouched by guilt, unaffected by the consequences of their actions, but conscience has a unique power. It doesn't rush. It doesn't shout. It waits. And when the world goes quiet, when they're alone, when the distractions fade, when the noise dies down, that's when it speaks. Their punishment isn't in what the world sees. It's in what no one sees. It's in the silent moments when their thoughts become louder than anything around them. It's when they look in the mirror and see not their reflection, but their choices. They see you, the way they treated you, the way they lied, manipulated, twisted the truth, and suddenly the image they project to others becomes unbearable to themselves. You can't fake peace when your conscience is in chaos. Every time they see someone who reminds them of you, it stings. Every time they hear your name, even in passing, their stomach turns. Every time they succeed, there's an echo of your voice in the background, not accusing them, but reminding them. Not reminding them of what you said, but of what they did. And that memory doesn't fade. In fact, it grows louder over time. Because truth has a way of maturing in silence. What they dismissed as not a big deal begins to feel monstrous with every passing year. And while the world may move on, the mind doesn't forget the moment it abandoned what was right. They carry your voice within them now, not because you haunt them, but because they betrayed something sacred. And when someone violates the sacred loyalty, trust, love, they awaken a part of the conscience that can't be silenced with success, money, or distractions. There is no escape from that inner reckoning. They try to pretend. They laugh louder. They work harder. They surround themselves with noise. But at night, when the lights are off and the mask falls, they're not who they claim to be. They're just a person who remembers what they've done. And no one else may see it, but they do. And God does. They might fool people. They might even fool themselves for a time. But eventually the burden gets heavy. It shows in their eyes, in their decisions, in their avoidance, in the way they can't talk about the past without growing defensive or silent, because they know there are things in that past that were never made right. That's what their life has become now, a performance haunted by unfinished business. You see, divine justice doesn't always strike loudly. Sometimes it allows a person to succeed just long enough for them to be trapped inside the very self they tried to hide. They don't need bars to feel imprisoned. They don't need chains to feel bound. All it takes is a conscience that won't forget. And it never does. The very blessing of being human, our ability to know right from wrong, becomes the curse for those who deliberately choose wrong. They wake up every day and try to avoid it. But it's there, in their chest, in their thoughts, in the quietest part of their soul. That's where the real punishment lives. They may never say it aloud. They may never come to you and confess. But make no mistake, they are already living in the sentence their own conscience handed down. And that sentence plays on repeat, every single day. So now you know the truth you've been waiting to hear, perhaps your whole life. No, you weren't crazy for feeling betrayed. You weren't weak for trusting them. You weren't wrong for loving with a pure heart. They were wrong for thinking they could walk over your goodness without consequence. They were wrong for mistaking silence for weakness. They were wrong for thinking that God wouldn't see, that heaven wouldn't respond. But now life is responding, slowly, silently, powerfully. The very things they once celebrated are becoming the very things they can no longer bear. Their comfort is turning into a cage, their fame into isolation, their wealth into torment, their circle into chaos, their peace into pieces, their success into a sentence, and their conscience into a courtroom that never closes. This is not vengeance. This is not bitterness. This is the sacred justice of a universe governed by divine order. And that justice always balances the scale even when it takes time. And you, yes, you, the one who cried in silence, who questioned your worth, who replayed the betrayal over and over again, you are being lifted. You're rising from the ruins they left you in. You're healing, even if it's slow. You're being restored, even if they never say sorry. Because what they took from you was never stronger than what God is now giving back to you. And maybe you still don't have all the answers. Maybe the wounds still ache on certain days. But take comfort in this. Their story isn't over and neither is yours. But your ending will be peace. Your ending will be wholeness. Your ending will be restoration. And theirs, unless they repent, will be a life heavy with blessings that became burdens. Because no one outruns justice, and no one escapes the consequences of a conscience that knows what it did. So lift your head. Wipe your tears. You're not forgotten. You're favored. God is not done. In fact, He's just getting started.